Your father made a lot of money, right? How much did we inherit? My wife asked me that a day before the funeral was even a day old. What? I was about to tell the truth, but I lied instead. It's $0. My brother inherited everything. When I said that, my wife laughed and made a surprising remark. I knew it. Then I'm going to leave you for your brother, David. What? He's cooler than you, has more money than you, so it's only natural. Besides, we're already in love. Okay, then do what you want. My name is Kevin, and I'm a regular office worker. My wife, Jennifer, and I have been married for 2 years. I met Jennifer when she was newly assigned to a client I was working with. She's younger than me, but she's well-spoken and cool, and I fell in love with her the first time I met her. Then, as soon as we worked together a few times, we grew closer and I confessed to Jennifer my feelings, and we started to date. A year after we started dating, we got married. Now, we're leading a somewhat happily married life. But compared to my past self, I think it's quite a miracle that I have built such a happy family. I wasn't always cared for by my mother at home. My mother loved my younger brother David more than me. I think it is common for the youngest child to be loved, but my home was quite different. My mother really doted on my younger brother. As a result, I was completely neglected. When my brother was still small, my mother played with him, and I always played alone, so it felt really lonely. It was good on holidays when my father was home and took care of me, but on weekdays, my father was always busy with mom and came home late, so I was always left alone and felt really lonely. My brother was objectively quite good looking, so when my mother walked outside with him, she was often approached by people who said he was a cute little boy, and my mother would always look very pleased with herself. And so my mother always bought new clothes and toys only for my younger brother. As my brother and I grew up, my mother doted on him even more as he got better and better looking. The meals served on the table were more luxurious for my younger brother, and when my father couldn't make it home before the last train because of overtime, she would go out to eat just with him. And my brother was not only good looking, he was also a good student. That was another reason why my mother doted on my brother. I, on the other hand, have an average face and got just average grades. My mother didn't send me to college when I was a senior in high school because she said it was a waste of money to pay tuition for an average person like me. Father asked me if I wanted to go to college, but my mother arbitrarily said that I don't have any aspirations to go to college, so I had no choice but to graduate from high school and then get a job. At the time, I was longing for campus life, so it was a real shock. But looking back, I'm grateful because the situation ultimately led me to work at the company I joined at the time. By the way, my younger brother was naturally sent to a private university, so when I left home to start working, I was told that I had to repay this debt as well as repay my father by sending money home. But every time I visited my hometown, I would see my mother and younger brother wearing expensive bags and accessories, so I think my financial contributions may have been wasted on them. After getting a job, I experienced many things as a working adult and gained some emotional stability. Even after seeing my mother continue to dote on my younger brother, I barely gave it a second thought and simply thought, here we go again. Instead, when I visited home, I cherished the time with my father and often had conversations with him. Since I'm old enough to drink alcohol, I often had evening drinks with my father and sometimes went drinking after work. My father seemed happy that I was making time for him. David is always attached to his mother and she always spoils him, so he likes your mother even more than me. Dad was very open with me and always treated David and me equally. David was definitely raised by his mother to be spoiled. I tried to educate David as well as I could. It's not your fault, Dad. My father gradually came to the realization that there were issues within the family as my younger brother and I were growing up, which is why he provided me with the care and showed me as much kindness as he could. If my father's support was not with me, I sometimes feared that I would have crumbled and not been able to maintain my place in society, so I'm really grateful to my father. Sometime later, I met and married my present wife. My father was very happy about my marriage with my wife. My mother and brother were not interested in my marriage and only cared about the food at the wedding ceremony. But when I brought Jennifer to my parents' house to say my wedding greetings, my brother's eyes perked up as he looked at her. My brother's fiancée is cute. She should choose me instead of my older brother. I was suddenly taken aback when he said that. It's nice to be praised like that, she said it with a smile at the time. I felt uneasy about the possibility of my younger brother harboring romantic feelings for her, as they both are the same age and he is younger than I am. My father said, "Don't tease David by saying such strange things, okay?" I was glad that the situation was settled for the time being. When we had a successful wedding and started our honeymoon, we were happy newlyweds. But now, 2 years into our marriage, once again I'm about to have my life interrupted by my mother and brother. It all started with a single phone call from my mother. "Dad hurt his back and needs help. You need to take care of him." What? What do you mean all of a sudden? What do you mean Dad needs care? My mother pushed the care of my father onto me without any explanation. Due to years of overwork and strain, my father, who is currently 62 years old, has developed a debilitating back pain. I was surprised by this sudden situation, but I felt grateful for my father's kindness, so I agreed to take care of him. I couldn't force my wife to live with my father in our home, so I started visiting my parents' house every day to care for my father. However, during the weekends, I was also working, so I couldn't provide care then. My mother demanded that I pay for a caregiver. I wondered why I had to bear such a burden, but if I didn't do that, it seemed that my mother and brother would just outright abandon my father, so I reluctantly bore the burden. At my parents' home, both my mother and brother stayed home all the time and did not work, and despite my father sleeping in the room, both my mother and brother were talking bad about him. "It's really useless to be out of work right before retirement. What a pitiful father, he was only good at earning money." The comment that my father was good only for his money, I felt nothing but disgust at this comment. I wondered how they could say that with such impunity. Even though I felt bad, I worked hard every day to go to my parents' house to take care of my father. My father said he was really sorry to me and looked very apologetic. My father didn't do anything wrong, and he didn't have anything to worry about. While tending to my father, I had the opportunity for one-on-one conversations with him as my mother and brother kept their distance. This was the only opportunity for me to connect with my father and escape the worries of my mother and brother. My father's condition worsened and he had to be hospitalized. From then on, I spent many days going to the hospital to visit him. My mother and brother didn't visit him even once. I was appalled, but I didn't want to run into my mother or brother in the hospital room. I thought that avoiding them would make me feel better. A year later, my father passed away without recovering from his illness. I barely made it to the hospital in time to see my father's last moments. I said goodbye to my father and wished him a good rest. After the funeral was over, I got a call from a lawyer who my father had hired. I went to the lawyer's office, where I was shown my father's will. To my amazement, I was left with $3 million inheritance by my father. My mother and brother would only receive the remainder of his estate. In addition to the will, there was a letter to me in which he thanked me for all the good I had done for him and for taking care of him, and he also wrote an apology for making me feel lonely when he was busy with work and was not able to protect me from my mother and brother. I burst into tears. My father took good care of me. It's because of my father that I'm able to live like I do today. After looking at the will, I went to my parents' house to organize his belongings. Then, my mother and brother looked at me with death glares. I asked them if they wanted to get rid of my father's belongings as soon as possible, and my brother said he needed to talk to me first. "I have no intention of giving you a penny of my inheritance." "Huh?" "Your father left a will." Looking at the will handed over by my mother, it was written that all the inheritance would be divided between my mother and brother only. However, the will was written completely in my mother's handwriting, so it must have been a forgery. I couldn't help but marvel at that. My mother and brother must have felt shocked that they hadn't received any of the inheritance. While smiling regretfully, I said, "It's just how things are. There's nothing that could have been done." I wonder if they were just extremely cowardly people. But I don't want to give the ones who treated my father so carelessly a second thought. I focused on sorting through my father's belongings and then quickly went home. When I got home, my wife immediately rushed to my side. I was wondering what it was for, and then my wife opened her mouth and said this. "Your father made a lot of money, right? How much did we inherit?" My wife asked me that question not long after the funeral was over. I was about to tell the truth, but I suddenly lied. I had a bad feeling, and that hunch was spot on. $0. My brother inherited everything. When I said that, my wife laughed and made a surprising remark. "I knew it! Then I'm going to leave you for your brother, David." "What?" "He's cooler than you, has more money than you, so it's only natural. Besides, we're already in love." "Okay, if that's what you like." My wife was apparently having an affair with my brother, but I had my suspicions. Whenever I went to care for my father, for some reason, my wife used to come along too, but instead of helping with caregiving, she talked to my brother the entire time, and then she would return home after having a meal. It seems like that was when my younger brother became close to her. At that time, I heard from my brother and mother that my father was making a lot of money, and if my father died, they had planned to live together and split the inheritance. Even when we were alone, my wife talked about my brother all the time, and I was losing feelings for her. She even declared her affair with him outright. The two of them can join each other in hell. I signed the divorce papers my wife had prepared and filed them myself. My wife packed her things and immediately moved to my parents' house. She told me she was going to renovate the house and live there with someone. I decided to let it be for a while because I knew it was going to be interesting. Then I got word that my ex-wife and my brother had gotten married and commissioned a home renovation, so I decided to visit my parents' house at that time. "What are you doing here?" When I visited my parents' house, both my mother and younger brother, as well as my ex-wife, became quite unhappy. I had a lawyer with me, so I ignored their attitude and continued the conversation calmly. The reason I came here was to show them the correct will and to ask for compensation for the extramarital affair. When I said that, my mother and younger brother were quite disturbed. "What do you mean, the correct one?" It was a pain for me to do it, so I had the lawyer explain it for me. "This is the will that was left to me. The fake one you prepared is invalid, and if you had forged it, you will be excluded from the entire inheritance. If you claim that it is real, all you need to do is subject it to handwriting examination. But according to the correct will, the entire inheritance belongs to Kevin. You had a residual inheritance, but since you forged the will, you will be excluded from the inheritance and receive nothing." When my mother heard the lawyer's statement, her face turned blue. "Oh, no! Why does he get it all to himself?" My brother and mother were going crazy, so I calmly replied, "Did you guys ever once care about Dad? I wouldn't leave my inheritance to such people. This is karma." My mother fell to her knees on the spot. My brother looked at my ex-wife and said, "You did all this. You told me that if I wrote a will, I would get my inheritance." "My fault? You and your mother were the one who were all about it." My ex-wife and brother started to fight right in front of me. I further confronted them with the reality of the situation. "Like I said before, I'm suing you both for alimony. You better brace yourselves." "Oh no, wait, Kevin, we just started the renovation for the house. We don't have any money to pay alimony." "Then why don't you just cancel the renovation?" "Well, there'd be a cancellation fee." "Anyway, that's all I have to say. Well, I wish you a long and happy life." With that, I left my parents' house. After that, I sued for alimony from my ex-wife and my brother. They each had to pay me $20,000. Apparently, my ex-wife had commissioned an expensive renovation plan for their family home, and the cancellation fee alone was over $30,000. So my ex-wife and brother were now $70,000 in debt when you added the renovation fee to the alimony. They did not inherit any assets and couldn't renovate their home, and only accumulated a debt of $70,000. What a nice person she was. However, she got what she deserved for acting selfishly all this time. On the other hand, I plan to make the most of the inheritance I received from my father, using it for stock investments and real estate purchases. I now enjoy a life of leisure, thanks to my secondary income. I've even been able to leave my job and live comfortably in semi-retirement. With plenty of time and money, I'm even planning to go abroad soon and start a life overseas. It's deeply saddening for a mother to show favoritism between her two sons, who both deserve equal love and attention. Such a mother raised my younger brother to have the worst of personalities. It's good that the villains all fell in the end. But it's also good that the protagonist was able to retire semi-permanently. From now on, I hope you will do all the things you want to do and live a full and happy life. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed today's story. Please subscribe to our channel. See you in the next story.